You know what's one of my favorite things in the whole wide world? Video games. But based on the title, I bet you thought I was gonna say trains, which is exactly what I'm about to say, because trains are also one of my favorite things ever in the history of forever. You're telling me that not only do trains provide cheap public transport, but they also allow me to daydream about meeting my soulmate in the 5 minutes that I have until my next transfer. Oh, and they're better for the environment because they emit less carbon than cars or something like that. But potentially having my soulmate sit next to me, now for that, I'm signed up. But what if we took my two favorite things, video games and trains, and combine them? Well, we've just unlocked a new form of dopamine because trains in video games are the coolest things ever, and I want to talk about them. You've got relaxed trains where you're just chilling, having a vibe. You've got murderous trains that want to see your head bashed into multiple pieces. You've got trains as a base of operations that circle around the map and you can just return to an exit on a whim. We can categorize the many various ways that trains are used in video games, so let's actually go ahead and do that and sort them out and talk about them. When you think of trains, you probably think of transportation. At least that's the very first thing that comes to my mind, so let's start from there. Trains as transportation in video games. These are the kinds of trains that get you from point A to point B, either automatically via a cutscene or manually, where you physically choose the train's path or maybe even steer it yourself. In the Marvel Spider-Man franchise, swinging around New York feels incredible. Seriously, this web swinging ranks amongst the top 10 ways to maneuver through an open world easily, but that's not what I'm here for. I want to see trains, and you want to guess what New York is known for? When you're not in the mood for web swinging, this game's fast travel option features Spider-Man hanging out with locals on the famous New York subway system. Spider-Man makes you feel like actually taking the New York subway, and that's saying something because if you've ever used New York's train system, it's basically like that one scene in Banana Fish. The trains in Marvel Spider-Man do exactly what a video game is designed to do. They take you away from the real world and make you enjoy something that in reality doesn't have the best reputation. Look at this poor salaryman sleeping on Peter's shoulder. I want to be that guy. Put me in the game. Wait, actually, on second thought, don't do that. New York is always having a meltdown in these stories. But let me take you guys back to the advent of the train, the place where it all started. That's right, we're going back to the Industrial Revolution with Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Aside from the fact that this is actually a pretty solid Assassin's Creed game, trains are a huge part of the plot and the world building because, as you might have already noticed, we're in Victorian London, the time period in history marked by mass train production. Trains are everywhere in this game, but the coolest part is that your base of operations is inside of a train, and it's not some boring stationary train that isn't operable. No, this thing regularly tours the map. It's a moving base of operations that you can hop in and hop out of at any time, and it also doubles as a fast travel tool. This train is where you gloss over your missions, check out your progress in liberating London's boroughs, and see how far along in the story you are. The train also allows you to customize the two main characters, Jacob and Evie. Above all else, the train hideout is a calm respite from the bustling streets of London. Stroll through different train compartments, take your time soaking in the sights before returning back down to street level. Idling in a home base in a video game never felt so satisfying, and you're actually moving around the map, which is the coolest part. You might get on the train in one borough, do some stuff here and there, tinker with your inventory, maybe choose a different objective, then hop off in a completely different borough on the other side of the map. Just be careful on your way out. This train can be tricky to get off sometimes. Speaking of tricky trains though, where the is the Ginza line. The Persona series actually has a lot more to do with trains beyond just Persona 5. If you take a look at Persona 5 on its own though, regardless of if you played it or not, it's pretty obvious. Trains are everywhere. The biggest dungeon in the game, called Mementos, is a twisty, windy, really messed up looking variation of the Tokyo subway system. On the title screen of the original Persona 5, the characters strike a pose as a train whizzes past them. Look, I love the Persona 5 Royal title screen. It's fantastic. It's pleasing to the eyes, but you really had to be there for the original Persona 5's title screen, and this makes me a different kind of happy. Anyway, trains are core to Persona 5, and one of the very first objectives the game gives the player is to find the Ginza line. Is it this way? No, that's not it. Do I go over here? Wait, I was able to scan my card. I think I made it. Yeah, that wasn't so bad. If you've played Persona 5, you'll know that manually boarding the trains is only done once or twice. For the rest of the 98% of playtime, you're going to be fast traveling to every location, where you get this super cool transition of the inside of a train cart as you warp to your next destination. I've played Persona 5 so many times, and on top of all the things this game does right, the fact that there's a functioning train system in the game that gets utilized on the rare occasion is one of the coolest details ever. I once tried to play this game by manually going everywhere with the trains, and if this game wasn't already long enough with a near 100-hour campaign, then playing in this way would add like an additional 30 hours of game time. But now let me really blow your mind. This train system is a micro-level view of the fast travel from previous Mega 10 games. Look at how the main character takes a train when you travel from most locations. Of course, you don't see them boarding the train, and that's where Persona 5 comes around and says, yeah, we'll program a whole train network network that'll barely go used because why not? If you thought that was pretty neat, I now present to you one of the coolest trains as transportation in video games. And for this one, we're going to the PlayStation 3 with the original 2009 Infamous. In that game, you play as Cole McGrath, who has the power to manipulate electricity, and you know what primarily runs on electricity? In this fictional world of Empire City, which is based on New York City, Cole can hop on top of the carriage, making him and the train zip across the world as one. Is it the fastest way to travel by train in a video game? Definitely not. Is it all that practical? A traditional fast travel option would have been much quicker for sure. Is it an insanely unique and novel idea though? Absolutely. The Infamous franchise is known for its exciting movement across the map, like Cole using these power lines to skate across the city, or Delsin using his different superpowers in Second Son to utilize the environment. But there's just something about hopping atop a train and acting as a supercharged battery that tickles my gamer brain. Trains are designed to provide transportation, so it makes it 10 times cooler when video games take a simple concept and break reality to make it super fun and engaging. But let me ask you guys a question. Do you ever hop into a train or any form of public transport for that matter and start to generate a narrative in your head, almost as if you're the protagonist to your own story? Well, some video games do exactly that. These games take trains and interweave them into the story by making them these dramatic set pieces, with you, the person in control of the main character, as the centerpiece. In both Half-Life 1 and 2, the game begins with the main character Gordon Freeman pulling into a train station. This includes the fan remaster called Black Mesa, which actually received Valve's blessing and is considered as part of the Half-Life franchise. And even though the original Half-Life has aged pretty gracefully, Black Mesa is a gorgeous reimagining. It pushes the source engine to its absolute limit, and I want to show you guys the beautiful train sequence in this game specifically. If you've ever played Half-Life or Black Mesa, which if you haven't, go play that as soon as you can. This opening segment where Freeman pulls into the Black Mesa facility is the calm before the storm. The changing scenery as you enter the facility is the icing on the cake that really sells this as a certified train moment. You go through all these different environments, seeing unique sectors of the facility, seeing what looks like weapons manufacturing, scientists fixing these things here and there, a brief glimpse of the New Mexico wilderness. Your position in the Black Mesa facility, your assignment, and your clearance level are all shown towards the end of this opening train ride as well, so it gives you a sense of what your purpose is as Gordon Freeman. But at the very end, just before the train docks at the station, you see this scientist banging on a door in what looks like a highly radioactive area. Whether or not this moment is meant to be a gag, I don't know, so I might be looking at it too deeply, but the way I see it, this moment being placed at the very end of the train ride is exactly that calm before the storm I mentioned earlier. And very shortly after you leave that train and go about your job, shit goes south real fast, and there isn't much of a facility left after that. What the f is going on? This is my first day on the job. I need this paycheck, man. In Half-Life 2, the mysterious G-Man starts the game with this exposition before you get transported to a train, but the vibes are completely different from Half-Life 1. This train has cracks on the glass, there's graffiti on the exterior of the carriage, the railway is pretty dirty and generally unkempt. The world has completely changed from Half-Life to Half-Life 2, but what makes the train ride so special, aside from this iconic scene with G-Man, is the fact that you can feel that something is wrong before you even exit the train, and as you move further along, you notice that these people are being treated like animals. Speaking for myself personally, I played Half-Life 2 before Half-Life 1 via the orange box on PlayStation 3, which was definitely a uniquely strange way to experience Half-Life for the first time. But I basically knew nothing about the events of the first game, but this train ride clued me in that something had gone terribly wrong prior to the start of Half-Life 2. Oh, don't mind my weapon by the way, it's just a regular crossbow. Moving right along, if we're talking about trains that are in disarray, then Uncharted 2's opening sequence is super high up on the list. The game hooks you brilliantly by showing the protagonist Nathan Drake bloodied and battered sitting in what is unmistakably a train cart. I'm not even kidding you, this is the very first shot that you see of the game aside from the quote by Marco Polo in the beginning. The camera fades into and out of black because you're actually seeing from Nathan Drake's perspective immediately after he's regained consciousness, and then the camera cuts to actually show Nathan Drake waking up, looking worse for wear. The train and Nathan are pretty beat up, but he seems to have made it out okay, until you realize the train is upside down hanging off the side of a cliff. And then you're given control of Nathan Drake and taught how to play the game while the poor dude's life is in your hands. Climbing up this train, you get a sense for why some people in the community refer to this guy as Nathan Break, because I kid you not, as someone who's played every single Uncharted game, this guy has Midas touch, except he doesn't turn anything into gold, he just breaks whatever he touches. Eventually, Nathan Drake is able to escape the wreckage and the train falls down into the abyss. What an awesome way to not only introduce a game, but a game that's a sequel to a franchise that was brand new at the time. Like, imagine if instead of a train, it was an airplane. Lots of people already have a fear of flying, myself included, so if they had used an airplane, it would have played into that very common fear. But starting the game with a train hanging off the side of a cliff makes you think, what the f happened for us to be in this situation right now? On to less bizarre things, Final Fantasy VII opens with the iconic portrait of Aerith, followed by the zooming shot of the city of Midgar, with occasional cuts to, now say it with me guys, Surprise! A train! This opening segment where Cloud is atop the train has endured for decades because of just how good it is at hooking the player in. And then it happens. Mercenaries leave the train and take out a few guards, but one of them stays behind to motion the entrance of the man with one of the biggest swords in gaming history, Cloud's Strife. A variation of this opening segment will later be used in 2008 for Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, a prequel story to the events of Final Fantasy VII, and in 2020, Final Fantasy VII Remake would reimagine that shot of Cloud making his grand entrance by leaping off a train. The train here serves two purposes. On the surface level, it's the vehicle that transports Cloud into the fray. That's just an ordinary fact, but one that I'll bring up later, so I want to put a pin on it for now. The other purpose of the train is to show that Cloud is not on the same level as the rest of the crew. While they can ride the train without security concerns, Cloud has to ride atop the train, putting him in a league of his own. Once you get through this whole mission and blow up the reactor, you gotta escape Midgar quickly, and that's where I want to remove the pin from earlier, because not only was the train Cloud's entrance, it's also his exit strategy. Final Fantasy VII does an insane job of putting you into that steampunk mindset, and the trains are one of the coolest parts of it. Trains pop up all the time in this game. There's even a level called the Train Graveyard where I'm assuming mass-produced trains that are no longer in service are sent to gather rust. Anyway, switching to a more positive note, we have Animal Crossing New Leaf, one of the coziest games I've ever had the pleasure of playing. In that game, you start with a first-person trade ride where you run into Rover, and this is, as far as I can recall, the only time in the game where you're in the first-person perspective. Why does this matter? Well, this design choice achieves two very important things. Firstly, it puts you directly in the shoes of the main character, so it really does feel like you're on this train ride into Uncharted territory. You're calling all the shots here, from naming your new town, to selecting its design from a randomly generated map, to imagining what your character will look like, since there isn't a designated screen or anything to build your character. Then, when you bid farewell to Rover and exit the train, you actually get to see what your character looks like, and as the townsfolk are welcoming you, that's when it hits you. The character you are now is what Rover imagined you to be, and that's just something so mystical about that, especially since Rover disappears alongside the train that brought you to the town, never to be seen again. Similarly, in the original Bayonetta, the namesake of the franchise, Bayonetta herself, arrives to the city of Vigrid with a train, and just like with a packed airplane, when the train arrives at the station, you'd normally get up and impatiently wait your turn to get off as a line starts to form down the hallway, but in this game, you realize that Bayonetta exists in a different plane entirely, just casually phasing through pedestrians as she exits the train with no problem at all. Narratively, Bayonetta's arrival via train sets the tone for the kind of brilliant juxtaposition that the game proudly wears on its sleeve. She's a witch, she doesn't conform to human notions, but here she is, riding a train like any other person would to get to their destination. And it's shown that she can travel through dimensions with the help of Rodin, so it's not like she's forced to use the train, but Bayonetta as a game is all about taking simple things and extrapolating them to the extreme, like this bike section where she uses her middle finger as the ignition key. But before we can even get to this ridiculous level of contrast, it all starts here with this quaint train ride. There's something very elegant about trains and their ability to convey a narrative, whether via total destruction like in Uncharted 2 or by invoking a feeling of soothing mystery like Rover's one-time appearance within the train carts. But what if we took all that elegance away and used trains as a weapon? These next few games are ones that weaponize trains, either directly like a literal weapon or indirectly like environmental set pieces that influence gameplay. And I want to start with a franchise that I've already talked about before, the Persona series, but specifically Persona 3, and even more specifically Persona 3 Reload. The very first boss fight you fight in that game is this uniquely designed shadow that traps you and your allies in a moving train that's moving rapidly towards a head-on collision. This enemy is in direct control of the train, using it against the player, and you've got to take it down quickly before the timer hits 0. I love how the enemy weaponizes the train in this sequence by using it to hold you hostage. It creates this tense atmosphere where you're trying to speed your way through combat, and if you're familiar with the game or the combat, you'll probably be fine. But for the newcomers, you're more prone to making errors in your game plan that can make you start to sweat a little. While the enemy uses a train against you in Persona 3 Reload, in Honkai Star Rail, you use a train against the enemy. Like literally, you launch a high-speed train straight into the enemy's face, and while it's an awesome moment, it's also kind of funny because although you don't see it, you're under the impression that the train conductor is the one slamming the vehicle into the enemy. So you'd think the one conducting the train is a character with a massive set of balls, insane guts, a crazy mentality. Yeah, no, it's this thing right here. This adorable animal is the conductor and presumably the one smiting the enemy with the train. I'm telling you, Pom Pom is secretly the strongest character in the game. Don't let this fuzzy cute thing fool you. You've got to have a different level of mental to launch a train at an enemy like a missile. But if we're talking about literal weapons that exist in our world, then look no further than Counter-Strike, a team-based shooter that's endured the test of time for years. If you haven't played Counter-Strike, you're probably wondering what this game is doing here, but if you have played, then you're probably familiar with the map known as Train. Makes a lot more sense now why this game is here, right? On this map, you don't weaponize the trains in an over-the-top comical way like in Honkai Star Rail, but the trains are still weapons nonetheless, providing cover, vantage points, callouts, bomb defusal sites. These trains are deadly because you never know what's going to be behind them or how the enemy will utilize them, making them a weapon all their own. However, nothing can compare to this last one that I have in store for you guys, because in Final Fantasy VI, you can suplex a motherfucking train. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening to me ramble about my love for trains and video games. I really enjoy talking about a bunch of games collectively. I plan to make this a mainstay series on the channel just because of how much fun I had making it. If a game you love didn't appear here, let me know down in the comments so myself and other viewers can check it out. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. I gotta catch this train, so I'll see you guys in the next one.